Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just letting a few people join here. Excited about the conversation today. I'm Anna Stephanie, Executive Director of famtech.org. Our goal really is to unite the innovators across the care economy. We're about 220 members, 175 companies. On average, we do about 16 virtual and in-person events a year, and we're thrilled to also be joined by Lauren, who's our entrepreneur in residence and hosting this series that many of you have been part of. Before I hand it over to Lauren, I just want to make a couple announcements. Our next virtual event will be on May 15th. We'll be exploring kind of the direct to consumer world. A lot of this has been focused on selling into HR. We'll be joined by Brooke Shapiro, who's going to be doing some direct to consumer marketing and partnership strategies. On June 12th, we'll have a virtual happy hour. For those of you who haven't been able to make it to one of our in-person events, feel free to join us. And just a quick heads up, our outlook for our next in-person event series, uh, August in Washington, D.C., and October in San Francisco. So we're working on those events and more to come soon. Before I hand it over to Lauren, I'd ask everybody to put their name, company, and location in chat. It's a great way for everyone to know who's here. And thank you so much for joining us. Lauren, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you for that context on Famtech, Anna. And just wanted to give the briefest intro on myself. I know most of you have heard me on this spiel, but as you know, I'm our entrepreneur in residence at Famtech, co-founder of Cocoon. And it's been so fun doing this series with all of you. This is not the last part of our series, but it is one of my favorite, most important conversations. And so I'm especially excited for today. And as you know, what we like to do is, oh, two boys, Amanda, yes. Okay, need to get some more advice from all the two boy families. I've heard just you need a lot of running around space. But that aside, please, throughout the conversation, drop in the chat any Q&A that you have for our conversation today. And we will also make sure in our fireside chat with Nikki and Michael to leave plenty of time for audience Q&A. So please don't be shy. We want to make this as conversational as possible. Okay, so just to recap where we've been and where we're going. For those of you who've been on these sessions for a number of times, which I see a lot of the faces who've been following every single session, thank you. We have really focused on a lot of hard skills, I would say, for the past couple of weeks, like how do you do sales? What are the different titles in HR? What is a broker? How do you incentivize brokers? What are channels? And so today, I actually really wanted to bring us to a more reflective state around some of the hardest things in building a startup, which frankly for me was starting a family and starting a company all at the same time. And I will say, Anna, Nikki, Michael, and I were all kind of reflecting on this earlier, that it's funny how a lot of times that's actually the most frequently asked question that we get. And so that's a big reason why I wanted to kind of pivot the conversation a bit for this last um, conversation, fireside chat for the session, and really tackle this, what I would say is the most challenging skill, which is how do you navigate life and work, especially if you're a startup leader at the same time. And so the goal is for this to be very real talk oriented. We'll have about 30 minutes to have a fireside chat with Nikki and Michael, who I will introduce shortly. And then I'm actually really looking forward to having some just more like intimate conversation among us as a community. We'll have a breakout on what I'm calling real talk circles. So just reflecting on our personal experiences, lessons learned, what we do differently, what we're proud of. And then we'll save a little bit of time at the end for a wrap up. Okay. With that, I want to go ahead and introduce Michael and Nikki. Michael is a founder and CEO of Maple. I'm sure Michael will give you a bit more on Maple, but in short, if you're having a family, definitely check it out. And before that, he also founded Kit, which was acquired by Shopify. So serial entrepreneur, knows a ton about startups and has two amazing boys, which Michael, I'll let you share more about. So definitely in the thick of it with all of us there. And Nikki, who's over in Vermont,
Mm.
is just an incredible startup leader. She led Mamava as CRO for 8 years. And I was lucky enough to meet Nikki when I was in the thick of my own experience having my first little guy and traveling just all the freaking time, like literally pumped in planes, trains, automobiles, bathrooms, like closets, like anything you can possibly think of, Ubers, etc. And I was so happy at this conference to meet Nikki, who took such good care of me. And I pumped in this wonderful Mama pod. It was amazing. So we had the chance to meet kind of in real life from that perspective. And I just so value her perspective on this really, really hard thing that many of us are going through. So welcome, Michael and Nikki.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So I want to really kind of like open up the conversation with some real talk to begin with, which is what is the hardest thing that each of you has experienced as a startup leader and as a parent? Maybe Nikki, if you don't mind kicking us off first.
Yeah, does birth count? I don't know if birth counts, but if birth
Yes.
doesn't count, if birth doesn't count, if actually birthing humans doesn't count, I would definitely say, the hardest thing, Lauren, you touched on it, for me was most certainly travel. Being the head of growth and the in a customer facing position, which most founders are out of the gate. And as the person growing the sales side of the organization most certainly was, I was on the road all of the time. I felt as if I was on a plane and traveling maybe more than I was at home with my family, which is a really challenging life conflict when you don't want to miss these really big milestone moments of your family growing up and your baby maybe learning new things, but the work that's required to actually grow the business. And that means in real life meetups and connecting with people and growing partnerships and building trust and all the things that have to happen by usually being in person. Now, certainly the pandemic, Genie came out of the bottle a bit that we can do more things remotely. And I had my third baby during the pandemic. So that was a new kind of shift for me. But it was, I would without question say that the travel dynamic and the hustle of startup culture while you're building a family was certainly kind of my biggest challenge that I faced and was able to overcome, but certainly also really needed to figure out what worked well for me.
Yeah, gosh, I could not resonate with that more, Nikki. I mean, travel is just like so challenging, especially when they're young. I mean, I think there's like the physical parts of it. If you're, let's say, breastfeeding, for
Yeah.
example. I just remember going to Florida one time for a conference, and my little guy was just like vomiting
Yeah.
stops. There's like the travel X sickness combination, and then I ended
Yeah.
up having to leave the conference early and fly back. He was fine, but like I think just the worry of it and being
Is
so far away is so emotionally challenging
yeah.
and
It's the
challenging to
men
be present, frankly, in a business
yeah.
context.
Yeah, I love your context on both the physical challenges. So, like your body getting up to get on a 5 a.m. flight, like that's not fun for anybody. Nobody like that's where you're like, okay, travel's jumped the shark. Like this is not like awesome. Doesn't feel as you're aging too, and as you're getting like it doesn't feel amazing to get on that flight. And then as you get there, just the mental mind load of like what's happening back home, and if somebody's not 100% healthy while you're not feeling well. I remember one time actually going to Florida as well, and I was going down and back in the same day from Burlington. Now, Burlington does not fly direct anywhere. That's not a thing from here. So it was like multiple stops. I'm on the 5 a.m. and I'm back here at midnight in order to be at an event the next day that I think my son had for school. And so it's like, it's a constant grind on your body while simultaneously like challenging your mind too.
Yeah, my gosh. Michael, what has your experience been as far as like some of these hardest moments?
Well, ironically, I left Shopify for pretty much the exact reason Nikki brought up. I remember when my son was born, and after I took my paternal leave, going back to work and sitting in a hotel room and doing the math and realizing I probably had missed 2 out of the first 4 months of his life,
Yeah.
which was a humongous catalyst for me ultimately leaving Shopify and wanting to start my own company again and taking advantage of being in control of my working environment. Um, for me, I think being a founder is a tremendously hard life. It comes with like a weight on your shoulders that's almost indescribable. There's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And I think that as a father, the hard part has been in the absence of a commute, walking out of my office door and, not making sure my kids don't feel this world. They didn't ask to be birthed to a founder that's a father. They didn't ask for me to run a venture-backed business. They didn't ask for me to take on the responsibility that has been bestowed upon me. And so they don't deserve to have a stressed out parent. Um, and so I think in a lot of weird ways, while working from home has been the greatest gift of all time, because I remember sitting next to a colleague on an airplane and her crying and me being just so confused as just a guy back then, so confused why this woman was sitting next to me crying. And it was that she had just missed her son's first steps. Um,
Oh,
and so the fact that I haven't missed life moments is the greatest blessing of all time. What a commute provides, though, is a 20, 30, 45-minute window to decompress,
mhm.
pull yourself back together, um, show up for your family in the right way, leave your work at a different physical location. And I have failed my family on a pretty regular basis on leaving here, taking 10 steps, going into my kitchen, and exhaling loud enough that everyone in the room knows that dad just had a hard day. And so I think I'm a work in progress. Most people would acknowledge that they are a work in progress. I haven't found a solution exactly just yet, but I am very cognizant in trying to get better for my family regularly.
The stressed out parent piece is something that I've struggled with a lot because I think my husband and I were both in extremely high pressure roles where he was an early stage VC, as a startup founder. For me, it was hard to be present even if I was physically present. So
Yeah,
what I mean by that is
totally.
I would be thinking about like a Slack message when I'm literally like playing with my son. And I would be physically there, but I'm not actually emotionally or mentally there at all. And that was actually something that I really struggled with, in addition to sort of like showing the stress in the family context, is what you were saying, Michael.
I mean, the guilt I feel, is I oddly, I don't want to go off the deep end, and I don't want to get emotional. I've really been truly struggling with the guilt of knowing that probably at the end of my life, some of my biggest regrets will be um, how work has interfered with how I show up for my kids.
Mm.
That's going to be right now my largest liability, and probably and for my marriage. That will be my probably my largest thing that I wish I could have course corrected that I'm at least aware of today that I'm trying really hard to get better at.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
gonna jump in and say that, like, especially, based on age of your children, I think that that's the other component too, is that once they get to an age where you can be a different type of active participant. So, Lauren, I know I told you that I'm like, I gotta leave right at 4 because I'm going to go coach my daughter in soccer, like pretty apropos to our topic today. But have felt the same thing in my kids' early childhood, so much so, especially in the stressed out and showing up in a stressed out manner, that I have had to be incredibly intentional with what I carve out and how I show up for them, that will create the memories for them and for me that I think will allow me to not look back and find regret on the moments that I might have come in hot because I
Yeah.
was upset about a Slack message or a customer not getting back to me on time or a contract that I was negotiating that didn't go the right way. And I think that that's been a big piece for me, similar to you, Michael. When I stepped out of my time at Mamava after 8 years, I said to myself, like, I have to be incredibly intentional with my time for them and with
Right.
them so that I don't have these moments of regret that have been the first 10 years of my son's life, you know?
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
the
Yep.
intentionality I want to come back to for sure, as far as kind of like how you both think about that. I know Meredith had a question actually. Meredith, if you're in a good place to come off mute, would love for you to ask your question to Michael.
Yeah,
Oh,
Michael, you talked about your paternity leave experience at Shopify, and I was just wondering if that affected how you're shaping parental leave at Maple at all.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, well, first of all, when I joined Shopify, I joined Shopify bought my company 3 days before my 30th birthday. I had no children. I was just married, or a couple years into my marriage, and I obviously didn't know anything about paternal or maternal leave. I never had to do my own research for it. I never actually. I feel almost embarrassed to say, but proud to say I never really thought about it to some extent. My first 2 weeks at Shopify, I was invited to an executive roundtable, and everyone had to go around the table and say what was their top fear or problem that they were trying to solve. And a woman explained that she was looking for a backfill for her job as she was getting ready to go on maternal leave. And I was so confused by this as I'm going to say an American male, because everyone I knew had only taken like 3 weeks off and gone back to work. And she was taking a full year off for maternal leave. And I learned quite quickly that there's a huge problem in America. I learned quite quickly that Shopify had set a gold standard that I was inspired to replicate someday. That they offered people, Canada as a country offers people 8 months off. Shopify offers people 12 months off, and they top fill the last 4 months of your parental leave. And um, I would love, and I say this publicly, and I hope that I'm able to deliver on it. I would love to be one of the first companies to offer a full year off of parental leave. I think it's time you never get to get back. I think that every parent should get to experience life in its purest form, and that is experiencing life with a newborn. We're a tiny startup and we're not there yet, but we do offer 4 months of parental leave off full pay. Um, we're a constant, we're constantly trying to improve. We offer time off for people that have experienced a miscarriage of a paid month off. I went through a miscarriage with my wife and I went to work the very next day, and it was one of the worst days of my life to go back to work and feel just dead inside. And so we try to offer people time off around tragedy as well. I think when you're a family first business and you believe that family is the priority, um, you have to design everything to the mission. And our mission is to make life easier for parents, not just the people who use our product, but the people who work alongside us to see that mission through. So we still have a long way to go. I'm proud of what we offer for the size of business that we are, but we have a really long way to go.
I love that, Michael. My gosh, that would be incredible. I have to say, despite having founded a company that literally is all about leave, Cocoon, I was telling this to Meredith and Maggie a couple weeks ago. My first experience was very, very challenging. I mean, I was basically going to a board meeting at like 7 weeks postpartum, almost working full time at 6 weeks postpartum, mostly remote, but it's just so challenging as a startup because a lot of times you just have a huge bus factor. It's like one person's gone, but there's no one to replace them. Like who's gonna manage the sales team when so and so is out, right? It's just like so challenging. So actually, one thing I'm curious about for both of you is how have you dealt with those kinds of situations in your leadership as far as like larger companies, there's more resources, more opportunities to backfill and so forth to what you were describing at Shopify, Michael. But when you're a startup, it's like any one person is critical in a lot of ways.
Nikki, would you like to go
But
first?
I'm happy to. I have a good story at Mamava where um we were a team of 4, And I had just hired my head of sales operations, who was going to basically help me build all the infrastructure so I could actually hire a capable sales organization and build a company. And I uh, I had a positive pregnancy test, and we were at an event, and she was sick the entire time and came and grabbed me and said, "I'm pregnant." And I looked at her, and the reaction that I had to both of us being pregnant at the same time in a company of four, meaning we had babies 1 week apart, and that we were going to take our walk the walk, same good maternity policy of 14 or of 16 weeks at the same time, was like pure terror. Because I had signed on. I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to say to Sasha, who's my founder and partner in crime the entire way at Mamava?" And the how she showed up is really what made all of the difference. Yes, Lauren, I was going to board meetings at 6 weeks postpartum too. I was breastfeeding in all of my meetings. It's just like it is. I felt it was a little bit of the territory, and being on the founding executive team and so committed to growing this business, as I know all you founders are. And it was never, it was always a choice, and it was never an expectation. And setting the culture, such a maternal culture of, no, no, I want you to have a baby. It was wildly different than my experience in more of a Shopify type setting, although it sounds like they had an amazing policy. But I was in a male dominated tech space for my first child, and I had the CEO say to me in front of a client, "Nikki, you're not having a baby anytime soon," and I was 12 weeks pregnant, and he didn't know. And so, like, what a different juxtaposition of experience, and having my founder say to me, "No, no, no, I want you to have a baby, and this is your choice as to how you participate." And we made it work. We didn't have backup. We made it work. It was, in the grand scheme of things, it is just 4 months.
Wow. Yeah, my goodness. I had a similar experience where our sales manager and I went out at the same time as well.
Oh,
Michael,
wow.
anything you add there?
Yeah, I mean, Maple has only had two babies in its existence. Um, One was me, and I probably set the wrong example. I took less than a week off with my second child, and quite honestly, a large part of that was a lot of immature thinking, and we were just getting ready to launch the business. Um, yeah, not proud of it. Wish I would have led and shown up a little bit differently. My co-founder, who's also a father, just had his first baby, and he took 2 full months off, and he's our only back-end engineer. So I know that it's possible. I think that, I had a conversation with somebody earlier this morning who asked me, when he's known me for a long time, when I was in my 20s, I said I would never have children and be an entrepreneur. And I obviously proved that that would not be true, because I ended up having two children and building a company again. And I think that one of the most proud pieces of my experience with Maple is, and maybe my investors don't love hearing this, but we're not a market cap business. We're a mission oriented business. And so we don't strive to create value for our shareholders. We strive to create value for families. And that means that you have to be able to practice what you preach. So no matter what position it puts Maple in, whether we're right now 12 people, for 20, 50, 100 people, it doesn't matter. We have to navigate around our mission, not try to drive a market cap. And I just use that as my guiding post on all decisions as it relates to the business.
The mission piece is so key. Thank you for sharing your personal story too, Michael. I think a lot of times it's like we don't know until we go there ourselves what we want out of the experience. I will say that for me,
Yeah.
where, for example, before having a kid, if you ask me like what I was willing to outsource versus not outsource in terms of childcare, I wouldn't even have a crisp answer because I just didn't know. And so I think that's actually something that kind of learned sometimes from just experience. And part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation to learn from folks who've been there.
And also, I just like, I don't know if she's listening or not. I told her I was about to jump on this panel, but a big shout out to my wife who has supported uh, some of my poor decision making and allowing and supporting me going back to work early with two small children at home. You know, Maple would not exist without her support, like full stop. She's a co-founder in my life, but she's also a co-founder in our business. And I think that, you know, people individually have to make decisions on what's right for their house home as well. And I think we need to remove stigmas around that. And in my case, my wife felt very confident in my ability to stretch both at work and at home, and her willingness to stretch at home and for us to show up together in a moment where we needed to. So thank you to her if she's on this call.
I love that. I once got the advice from a mentor that the biggest career decision I would ever make would be my spouse, which turns out to be very true.
Fact, total fact. That's a really good advice.
On the timing piece, this is actually a question I get all the time, especially from women, is timing around having kids. And then if you have the ambition to start a company as well, how to think about it. So I will say for me, I went into founding Cocoon and becoming a parent, knowing that I wanted to have a kid during the time of founding. And my two of my other co-founders, we all also were going through the same experience together. And I thought I had a good expectation of being a parent and being a founder, but definitely not the two of them to cross together. So I'm curious to get both your perspective. Nikki, sounds like you actually got pregnant pretty early into the mama journey. So how, like, what kind of advice do you have for folks who are asking about, like, hey, is this the right time? Is it not the right time? Is there a right time? Like, how do you decide if you want to be in a really intense, impactful role as a startup founder or leader, for example, but you also want to have kids?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because back to Michael's point on the mission, I had my first baby not working in the entrepreneurial space. I was with a private equity backed company, and we were growing very quickly. And I was flying all over the place, leaving him all the time. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not doing this for something that I am driven by and passionate about and is making the world a better place. I am doing this for, exactly to Michael's point, shareholder profits and to growth for growth's sake. And I really asked myself, like, why, and do I really want to do that? And so that was a lot of the impetus for me joining Mamava and jumping on board there really early to help them build the business. And so you also said, Michael, something about like your decisions around like what I always often call like your professional maturity, which I think is something that you learn over time. And for me, as we all do, as you age, as you have new life experiences, for me, I got better at that over time. My first experience with my first son, it was like, how do I keep performing? And I have to keep doing this job. And then my second was like, okay, I'm going to learn this way. In terms of timing, I had a lot of resentment. I'm going to say like that word, like really loud for, Sasha often called me the nanny the nanny that loved the baby more than the birth mom. And she was the birth mom of Mama, and I was the nanny, the first, one of the founding executives that came on to build the business. And that's like a real example of non-professional maturity and zero boundaries and loving something more, maybe that not more than your family, but just really being that dedicated to it, which I was. And I was on the planes all the time trying to grow the business. But I had total resentment in trying to figure out if I would have my third child, because I couldn't reconcile that I could add an additional life to this while I had this baby I was also trying to grow, mature, and take care of. And so I had major resentment at this company and this thing that I loved so much, because I knew I wanted to have a third baby and I was choosing Mamava over having the third baby. And I was in Bentonville, Arkansas for meetings with Walmart one day. I had just finished negotiating on a $9 million contract, the biggest one of ours to date. And I like stopped and I like had this moment of kind of professional maturity and clarity. And I was like, I have dedicated this amount of time to this thing that I love and I've seen the benefits and the results from it. Like I have to listen to my instincts of what I think is right for me and right for my family. And this was pre-pandemic, like coming, and I just said to myself, like, I'm going for it. Like I know I want a family, that I have 3 kids, and I do think things have to change. I'm going to need my partner to show up in different ways. I'm going to need to, as 2 full-time working parents, I'm going to need additional support and resources. And thankfully we could have that. And I went for it. And then the world hit and COVID happened, and, talk about like turning that upside down on your head too. So yeah, I guess it's never going to be the right time, but you have to listen to your own instincts.
I think you called out a really, really good piece, Nikki. And I'm really glad you mentioned the word resentment, because it is so easy to be resentful in a lot of ways, where it's like, gosh, why am I thinking about this Slack message or this board meeting when I should be spending time with my child and having like that quality time, right? Like I've definitely been there. And so I think like one thing that I would love to for both of you to also kind of weave in or share is what boundaries you've put in place or like have evolved to put in place as you've been thinking about sort of like timing of having children, having a family, and having a startup at the same time. And I don't know, Michael, you said like at one point you said you would never do that, but here we are. And so I'm curious like how you thought about it and then what systems or boundaries you've put in place to make it work.
Well, I'll answer both those questions and then pass it back over to Nikki. I think when I was in my 20s and, I notoriously worked 7 consecutive years and that paid off big for me. But I think that the problem is that 20-something-year-old Michael very much looked at building business and opportunity in a finite way. It was like, I have to accomplish this by this date. I have to accomplish this by this date. I have to accomplish this by this date. And so that creates, in a very weird way, a lack of ownership of time, because then you're playing by someone else's clock, whether it's your own mind games that you're playing or a venture clock that you're playing or a shareholder clock that you're playing. I think I feel really great about where I'm at as a founder because I don't worry about the competition anymore. I confidently think we're going to beat everybody, and there's no zero-sum game, but that we'll end up on top. Really difficult to beat the guy that never gives up. And part of that is that we believe fundamentally at Maple that we're a mission business. We are full owners of that clock. It may mean that the company outlasts me and that the torch is passed to somebody else, and we should be aiming to build a generational business that empowers systematic change, right? It's not just how we think about homes working better together and equality better at home, but how the workplace also provides a better life for parents and how government and policy provides a better life for parents. And we know that we're wanting to play a role in all of those things. And I think somehow taking off the pressure that this has to happen overnight gives you a better sense of ownership in terms of where the company is going. So like that's just like a grown-up change of a boy running a company versus like a grown man running a company or a grown woman running a company who's been in there, done that like we're not going out of business next month. Very few people are going to be there at the end of time. We will be, and it's all going to be okay. So I think that that's just one. I think when you then establish that framework, because I do think that generationally, instant gratification has ruined people. There's no more mystery of life. There's no more patience. I can't even tell you how many times at Shopify, a young man or a young woman who worked for me after 1 year was wanting to know when their promotion was happening. When were they going to be a lead? When were they going to be a director? So I think in a lot of ways, ambition and instant gratification, both at a founder level, an executive level, a craft level, it really deprives us of an opportunity to enjoy life for some reason. And I think that people just have to slow down. You can still be ambitious and run at a different pace. There is no great time to have a family, but there's certainly no better time to have a family, if you know what I mean. Like it's always hard. It's always going to change your lifestyle, whatever. But like there's no regret. I never met anyone who regrets having a family. And so my advice to people would be like, figure out how you can own your clock, be a part of a company that has a deep desire to move at a different pace, and like play the long game for yourself, personally and professionally. I do not want to speed time up. I wish my son turned 6 yesterday. I would give every single dollar I had to go back to the day he was born and relive the last 6 years. It's been the greatest human experience I will ever have. And when I'm 85, I'm going to wish that I was here right now in this moment. When my children are old and their children are, I'm a grandfather. I'm not going to be wishing that I was 86. I'm going to be wishing that I was 39 all over again. So I think that like awareness that the regret will be how I handled the moment right now, is ever present for me. And then how I lead, at least I can only speak to myself. And sometimes it's a painfully honest conversation, is I'm very well aware that none of my staff, none of my teammates, none of my people I've done business with, none of my venture community, they're not coming to my funeral. And respectfully, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to their funeral. My children will be at my bedside. My children will miss me when I'm gone. And so at Maple, the boundary line that is set is I'm actually more disappointed in my team when they don't show up for their family, when they're not at the kids' practice, when they're not volunteering at school, because like those moments of showing up for their kids will be their legacy. The work they do at Maple is not going to be their legacy. The work I do at Maple is not going to be my legacy. Me being an ever-present father is going to be my legacy. And so I can't selfishly have that for myself and not offer that to the people that are also empowering the mission at Maple as well. So I think that the boundary line is very clear. You're paid to do a job, but your legacy is associated to what you do at home. That's the boundary line. And you should never, ever, ever fucking mess up legacy.
Wow. I mean, that really goes super, super deep, Michael. I think just like the ability to zoom out like that and think like, what really matters in my life, right? Like literally on my deathbed, who is going to be there and who's going to be the people who are going to be the people thinking of me, caring for me. That definitely gives perspective.
I mean, it's not hard to put in a 2-week notice. It's incredibly hard to say goodbye to your spouse.
Right.
You're going to
100%.
change jobs 10 times in your life. You're saying goodbye to your kids one last time. You say goodbye to if you're lucky, if you're cognizant. And I mean, I just think that like we have to get back as a society to like returning people back to their life's work. And we have to just take all the bullshit out of life and just get back to the basic foundations of experiencing life as a human. It's like you show up and you do a job, not for your ego, to feed your family. You show up for your family.
Mhm.
Right. One thing I don't agree with is when companies say we're all one big family. We're not one big family at Maple. We're teammates at Maple.
We had the same thing. We were
We're
like,
teammates.
this is not a family.
I love you. We're teammates, but like, let me
Yeah.
be super clear. If you're drowning in a pool and my kid's drowning in a pool, I'm saving my kid. I'm not saving her. Right? Like, I'm standing in front of a train for my son. I'm not standing in front of a train for anyone at Maple. Right? And I think that like just drawing those lines and not trying to sugarcoat shit and not trying to pretend we are not trying to pretend. Like at the end of the day, we are in a business relationship and I want to honor that relationship. And I hope that my teammates honor it as well. But my real responsibility, and my team's, no kid on earth asked to be born. So if you're opting into that, then you need to be prepared to uphold that oath that you take.
Gosh, this is like such a revelation in so many ways, even for me as someone who has one child now and having another kid on the way, Michael, because I think that's like such a clear distinction, right? There's business and then there's family. And to your point, in this corporate sort of world that we're in, especially with startups, it's like very mixed. And why is that? And how do we make it super clear, like,
Oh, I
okay,
know
yeah,
why that is. I know why that is. I mean, I know Nikki knows why that is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
an age-old trick to get people to sign oath of their life to your corporation. But I want you to sound,
Professional identity
yeah,
too. You
it's
take
why
on
people
that
have
identity.
meltdowns when they quit jobs because they're like, I've worked here for 8 years, my whole life. This is not your life. They're
Yeah.
not chiseling
It's
senior
not you.
director of product
You're
on my
not defined.
tombstone.
Yeah, you're not defined by being CEO and founder of Maple. You're
No.
defined by being, I forget your kids' names, Michael. They're,
Leander and Solomon. That's
yeah,
it. My
that's right.
tombstone's going to say
That's
Michael
right.
Perry,
Father of this.
1986 to
That's
whatever,
right.
father and
That's right.
husband,
Yep.
goodbye.
That's right. It's
Right? And
not going to say CEO and founder of Kit, CEO and founder of Maple. Like that's not a thing.
no,
That's
I don't
what
know anyone
really,
that's putting
yeah,
Forbes 30 under 30 on their tombstone. Like it's
nobody.
like I
Yeah,
just think for some reason, like we've all drank this crazy amount of
yeah,
Kool-Aid that like
so
your
true.
identity is wrapped in your work or
That's
in your
right.
business that you found. That is a crock of shit.
Such shit.
Here, I'll tell you an example. And this is how many people, I don't know how to go on this call, but I go and speak at entrepreneur programs all the time. And I'll offer it to anyone on this call as well. I talk to every 22-year-old kid and I say, if you can stand up and tell me who the co-founder of TikTok is, I'll put $10,000 into your business right now, no questions asked. Do you know how many times I've had to write a $10,000 check?
0.
Zero. So if the largest used consumer app in the world, no one knows who that person is, what makes you think anyone's going to know what the fuck you did?
Totally.
Now, the flip side of that argument is I ask every single person to stand up if they can tell me what their parents did to make a difference in their life. You know how many seats stand up?
Everybody.
Every single one of them. So it's like, if we're all aware of it, why aren't we empowering it?
Mhm. That's the leadership culture that I think we can translate, that you learn as a parent, that can translate into organizations that will actually start to change the culture and break down some of this ridiculous um, uh, just infrastructure that's been built today, that we feel as if we have to be this specific identity and are totally defined by it. Yeah, I really resonated, Michael, with what you said about just this like linear way of thinking. And as an athlete, my whole life, like I have struggled with this so much. It's like meet the end goal, score the goal, like win the game, be on this specific timeline, and then like that's who I am. I'm Nikki, the power forward soccer player for University of Vermont, and this is what I've done. And it's like if anyone asks you like what and who really defines you, like it's not the places you played, the games you played. Like it has everything to do with the people that you've impacted, with the people that you love, with your community that you've built. Like that's at the end of the day what matters. And I feel like I can't emphasize it enough to new entrepreneurs, that it's just like you gotta prioritize yourself, your family. Like you'll get the most out of what you're building and what you're doing, and so will your customers. And so, like it will flow that way. Yeah, naturally.
And listen, I'm not trying, it takes a lot of hard work to be a founder. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
hard work to work at a startup. Like, I don't think you get to work 15 hours a week. I don't think it's rainbows and butterflies, but I think that like, you can create both. It's 1,000% positive. Like the last 30 days at Maple have been outstanding. And no one missed a single event with their kid.
Mhm.
Not one person that works at Maple has ever been asked to miss a moment with their child. Not one time. And I can swear on that on a stack of Bibles. No one has ever missed anything. And like that hasn't slowed us down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really powerful, Michael. And thank you for this just like truly, truly real talk conversation, because I think a lot of us are just like struggling with this piece. And I also want to just kind of, as we're thinking about just the practicality of it, right? There's like the philosophical piece around like how do you stand around work versus family, like how do those integrate? And then there's like the practical piece of like, okay, like what do you actually like what kind of advice or like tips can you actually help, or like that you've gained from your experience being a parent and a founder or a startup leader, that actually kind of help make it work? And so, Nikki, I'm curious, can you kind of like share any insights from your experience being a CRO at the same time as having 3 kids. Like, what are there any just practical tips you can give us as far as like, hey, this is like something I tried that worked for me?
I think that you said it first, where the partner you pick and your communication skills, you both said it, you are critical. So Lauren, I might have told you this, but before I had my second, my husband, we were in Park City, like on a vacation, and we were in a bookstore, and my husband, I was looking at Tiffany Defue's book, Drop the Ball. And he's like, I'm gonna buy this for you. And it was like his message to me that like it's okay to drop some balls. Because you're carrying it, her book is amazing. It's literally about like carrying the workload of being a working parent and how you split that, and what does that mean and how do you communicate through that. And he's like, I'm buying this for you because what I want you to understand is that, like, I don't expect you to hold every ball in the air. And I don't expect you to be this magician that is like getting on a plane, driving a company towards crazy growth, getting our kids to daycare every single morning, making sure the house is what it needs to be, like all the things that I expected of myself. And I think that was certainly, you know, as a person aimed at perfectionism and trying to figure out and frame myself up for what that looked like, being the perfect mom, being the perfect coworker, being the perfect partner, all the things. I think that I needed outside support, resources, and education, and community to tell me it was okay to drop the ball, a partner, a loving partner that said it was okay to drop the ball. And, you know, I did you know, seeing what Ashvini wrote in here around like outsourcing, like I think I had to recognize like it was okay to ask for help. And as somebody who was and strove for doing it all and watching having kids that are like, I can do it myself. I'm like, okay, well, I see where they got that from. I, you know, definitely recognize that like leaning on your community is a key part of being able to make entrepreneurship and family work.
I think the outsourcing question from Ashwini is a really good one. Michael, anything that you've discovered for yourself has been helpful on that front? Or maybe even
Well,
like perspective. So for example, for me, what I realized was that I was super willing to outsource things like cooking, for example. We actually got a cooking auntie that would come over on weeknights and cook dinner for us and clean the house, which was incredible. Happy to share more about that offline for anyone interested. But I was actually really specific about picking up my kid from daycare, for example, and curious like how you've thought about that from as far as like what you outsource and what you don't, for
well,
instance.
first of all, I don't think everyone has the privilege or opportunity to outsource. So I don't want to lean on that because I think if everyone could have a nanny to help them or a chef or like a house, like people obviously would like for life to be easier. Life is incredibly hard. Um, for me, there's been, I think, two really big shifts in my life. One is it doesn't have to happen overnight. Like understanding that very few things are actually time sensitive. There's actually only one thing that I've come across that feels time sensitive, and that's time with my children. My kids, for some reason, get older and bigger by the day. I haven't figured out how to, I've invented a lot of things. I haven't been able to figure out how to slow time down just yet. So um, I don't want to outsource that. I don't want to outsource time with my kids, no matter how much money you have. I think that my wife and I weren't able to naturally conceive children. We went through IVF. We were very intentional about building a family. We've been through a tremendous amount of heartbreak. I never complained about changing a diaper because I was made very well aware by a doctor I may never get to change a diaper. So my children are my first and my only actual priority in life. And I think I can still be an incredibly successful founder and running a mission-oriented business because I've taken the path of understanding that building a successful company at Maple means the company outlasts me. And I have no ego about that. I look forward to seeing 10 or 20 years from now what the next CEO of this business does. I'm cheering on the people at Maple while I'm running it and while I'm sitting on the sidelines. Like I believe that it is our right. I believe it is our purpose to be a parent. I think it's our purpose to build family. I think it's our purpose to care for one another. And I'm just trying to enjoy that purpose, like full stop. I'm just trying to slow my life down. I'm trying to enjoy my children. I'm trying to keep that lens that I don't have to be the person that takes this company across the finish line. Like I'm not racing anybody. I'm not in a race. I'm simply trying to raise my kids and do something
And
meaningful along the way.
you're building a tool for parents so that we can actually spend more time with our
Oh, I don't want to plug my own business out
Hang
here,
on,
Christina. I don't
I'll
want to
plug
plug my
it.
own business
I'll
out
plug
here.
it. I'll plug it. And you're building a tool for parents. I think I told him on a call that we had this past week. Like I spent 2.5 hours putting my kids' spring sports schedule
Mhm.
into our calendar. Like that is ridiculous and time not well spent on a Sunday when I should be outside kicking the soccer ball with
Totally.
my kid who is begging me to do so, but if I don't do this, I'm not going to have structure to where we need to be and when. And so like that's the other component too, is like if you're asking about frameworks or systems, like we also need to enable those to actually exist, and we need
Totally.
amazing founders and intentionality with building, and like
Totally.
thank God for you for doing that work.
Well, first of all, thank you for plugging us. I never like to go on these things and talk about Maple, but I do feel very fortunate that the problem that you brought up, Lauren, is largely what inspired a company to be built. And whether it's Maple or any other business out there, I think that having systems at home and treating your life partner as your life co-founder is the last, I think, big step of maturity, right? Is that no one stands on the altar and expects to be marrying an employee. And so you're standing on the altar and you're marrying somebody that you want to co-found life with, which means being inclusive of all aspects of your life. My wife is heavily involved in Maple, and I'm heavily involved in her world. And we don't try to live independently of one another in that way. We're interwoven, and I think that makes getting through the highs and the lows and the stress and the everything so much more manageable.
Everyone in this room is building a FamTech solution. And so I love that as far as how do we make it all better for ourselves and use entrepreneurship as part of that while doing it at the same time. So I know we're running a little bit low on time here, and originally I had wanted to have our Real Talk breakout sessions, but somehow that we just always get into these like really awesome conversations, and I struggled to actually pull people into another transition. But I'm really glad we had this conversation because some of the takeaways here are just so resonant. I mean, for me, especially what we talked about this conversation about owning your own time, right? And really being intentional about it. I remember a mentor of mine told me once that life is kind of like, the train system, right? It's like you could be on the bullet train one day, but then you could transition to the local train the next day, right? And so like figuring out where in your life you want to be is also so key, and being very intentional about it too. I love that. And also thank you for everyone who shared in the chat too, kind of like what's worked. Anna, about the 2-week sprint, stand up every Sunday. Oh my gosh. My husband and I actually, after this, have our family firm meeting for the month. We have a monthly family firm meeting. Happy to share more about that should anyone want some more context. But with that, I actually just want to transition us to a bit of a reflection wrap up. And I know we have a more intimate group today. So I would love for anyone in the audience to share one thing that you're grateful for from this conversation. And feel free to raise your Zoom hand or drop it in the chat.
Lauren, I just wanted to say one thing. Sorry, I put it in the chat too, but as a mom of a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old who were 5 and 2 when I was building, there is a ton of positive things that come from some of these sacrifices and trade-offs. And, I personally had boundaries that sometimes they weren't always a perfect formula. And so I just want to put that out there as someone who's kind of starting to see this page turn, that there's things I wouldn't even imagined that they would remember that is carrying through into their young adult lives. And so it's not only about being present with them, but showing up as an entrepreneur as well and exposing them to it. Because I have to say, what comes out of their mouth is pretty awesome right now.
I'm so glad you shared that, Anna. I think about that for myself a lot too, having had a working mom my entire life. And it truly was an inspiration for me to be a parent and someone who could do really, really amazing work in the world at the same time. So I love that, where it's like you don't even know your kids are watching, but they are.
100%.
That's amazing. Amanda, go ahead.
Um, Thanks, guys. This has been awesome, and I'm really glad I caught it live because I've been like, I think I'm at like a 25% in live attendance rate for these. But what I'm grateful for is just the validation and the camaraderie, because this is a lot of how I think as a mom and a founder. And I think this, like, I tell so many young founders that this idea of like 24/7, you have to give your life up for, I just think it's a farce, and I think it's a lie. And I don't know where, I mean, I learned a little bit about where we think it came from today. I'm just so grateful for the validation that like there's community in the balance and the prioritizing family above all else. And then like, I liked what you said, Nikki, piggybacking on Michael, like the things that are supposed to fall into place will fall into place when you prioritize the things you're meant to prioritize. So just really grateful for everyone in this whole conversation.
Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Amanda. So resonates, because I think a lot of times it's like, it feels like we're alone in doing this journey, right? But there's, what I so appreciate about FamTech is bringing not only mission-oriented founders together, like Michael, and startup leaders like Nikki, to transform how we integrate work and life, right? But also this community around supporting each other and knowing that, hey, there are other people who are going through the same journey together.
Yeah, I always say Silicon Valley is like a parody. The show is a parody for like a reason. It's like, that's not what we should try and make it look like.
I think also, just to echo, is like there's a lot of dirty secrets out there. Like, let's be very real. Like, Zucks is not going back into the office. Like, there's a lot of people out there who are forcing mandates that they themselves don't execute on. They have lots of help. They enjoy their children. Like, they're doing the things that we're talking about, and they want you to believe otherwise for whatever reason. Um, I just think that, like, at the end of the day, don't let anyone else write the story of your life. Like, you have to live with the chapters at the end. So, like, just do you.
Well said. Well, on that note, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you hugely, Michael and Nikki. Nikki, go get your soccer practice on. And we will see everyone next week for our bonus session on office hours, which is perfect timing for me to exit because my little guy just started saying mommy at the door. So on that note,
All
see
right.
everyone next
Thank
week.
you
And
all.
thank you
Take
again,
care,
Michael
you
and Nikki.
guys. Thank you so much.
You all.
Thank you. Bye.